Welcome back to the upper tier, folks. The football and pro wrestling podcast we bring you each and every day. If you could head over to YouTube and smash that subscribe and bell notification button. We're on the road to 900 subs, trying to get to 1,000 subs before the start of the new season if possible. So any help would be greatly appreciated. Of course, drop a like on the video as well. Tonight we're back with another review of Dark Side of the Ring, and this one is episode 4, Junkyard Dog. I think it's the mid-season break as well, after 4 episodes as well. So it'll be back, I think, in about 8 weeks or something like that with the last 4. How are you, Morris? How are you, my friend? GP Productions podcast. Evening, sir. Keeping her lit, absolutely as lit as I can. But this one is this is a personal one for me, because I have to say, JYD for me was one of the characters back in WWF. A lot of the time when I started really watching wrestling and stuff like that. And as I said many times before, on lots and lots of shows, it was those characters that drew me into the business and stuff like that, to really become a fan of it and stuff like that. Characters like JYD. And I often say you can have this is kind of the reverse of what we talk about. You can have all the wrestling skills in the world. You can be the most amazing athlete. You can look $1 million. You can really look like a superstar. But if you cannot connect with the audience, you're absolutely wasting your time. And that was the key thing with JYD. JYD wasn't the most skillful wrestler in the world. He hadn't got a plethora of moves and all this kind of thing. And we'll get into it as we talk about the episode. But what he did was he had a connection with the people. And that connection with the people drove him right to the top of the business, especially down in Mid-South. But the episode starts, and again, it's going to be in a theme through this Dark Side of the Ring season. Wrestlers who had the world at their feet, basically, who were making a lot of money, and suddenly for some reason are not making a move, or something happens and they fall off the wagon. They start taking drugs and drink and all that kind of stuff. They have one of those kind of addictive personalities, as they say, and everything just falls asunder, and they never reach the heights that they should have for one reason or another. So tonight it's the turn of the Junkyard Dog. We'll talk about how his life tragically ended and stuff like that. But we're also going to, at the end, we're going to celebrate the life of JYD as well, which is something that's not necessarily sometimes the way the show goes and stuff like that. But we're going to talk about his Hall of Fame class, and we're going to talk about some of his accolades and championships that he won and stuff like that. He was a phenomenal character, really connected well with the kids and with the audience. But we'll get into it. We'll talk. Sylvester Ritter is the man's name. Better known to us as wrestling fans as the Junkyard Dog, or JYD, as what used to be on his tights. It highlights his run to the top of wrestling world. And then, as I said, like so many episodes, discusses his tragic fall. Like the one thing that comes true on this, and it's an interesting topic, and something that we've heard in the past as well. A lot of the people who speak on this, the likes of Tony Atlas, Coco Beware, people like that, Jim Ross even, they talk about, that division between the white wrestlers and the black wrestlers in that time and all that kind of thing. And that, there was kind of an unspoken rule that you would only have so many black wrestlers on your roster, all this kind of thing. And they spoke about how JYD broke the mold as well when he went to Mid-South, and how he was the guy. Bill Watts actually, latched onto him, coached him, brought him through, made him a huge baby face, made him his champion. And he was incredible, and he was off and running. And again, he protected him as well in a way where, as we said, he didn't have a whole plethora of wrestling moves. So what he did was he booked it in such a way that it accentuated what JYD was good at, and it never delved into the stuff that he wasn't. So for that kind of reason, he was huge, obviously, down in Mid-South. Of course, he broke in, cut his teeth, as they say, up in Stampede. I'm sure under Stu Hart and stuff like that. That must have been an interesting time up there. Stu Hart's a guy who doesn't suffer fools gladly, that's for sure. He was a former college football player as well. So this guy had an athletic background, absolutely looked the business. And as it goes through the episode, you can kind of see the deterioration of the guy. and the effect that kind of, the demons were having on him. You could see a huge change in his physique and all that kind of stuff. So, what happened was he basically, he went on a path where he lost his focus on what was important, and he got stuck into the drugs and the drink and the dark side of wrestling and stuff like that, which, kind of forced him to miss shows and tied his hand and stuff like that. But we will get into that stuff as well. But obviously down in Mid South, that's where he grabbed the gimmick, the Junkyard Dog. And it hit really, really big down in Mid South. It was a huge territory. Watts was an unbelievable booker at the time and stuff like that, and took a punt on this guy at a time where most of the territories weren't taking a punt on black wrestlers and stuff like that. We heard Coco talking about it. He had kind of allured to the fact that in WWF it was kind of, it was Hogan and the white wrestlers and then everyone else and all that kind of thing. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it seems to be a common theme that comes out, But they talk about it being, Tony Atlas talks about it being primarily a white man's sport at the time and all that kind of stuff, So they talk about JYD, breaking through that ceiling and him paving the way for a lot of people. Teddy Long talks about it as well and stuff like that. And then he heads off. He gets the opportunity to go up to New York to WWF. And off he went, and he was obviously promised the sun, moon, and the stars because he was such a huge star. He didn't leave Watts under good circumstances either, because he left Bill hanging really when he left. But went off up to WWF. Kind of didn't pan out for him. And that's when that's when the demons and all started kicking in, and he started missing shows, all this kind of stuff, Ted DiBiase talks about working programs with him and stuff like that he was absolutely huge and stuff like that. Ted often spoke about working with him in the ring and highlighting the good stuff that JYD did and steering clear from the stuff that he couldn't do and all that kind of stuff, which is the sign of two very good wrestlers, really, when you identify that kind of stuff. So interesting, goes up to New York, kind of doesn't really hit the dizzy heights that he was expecting. I mean, obviously you're going from Watts' territory into New York, which is huge. This is Hogan World and all these other fabulous superstars up there as well. And he went in, kind of found himself kind of in mid to lower card. Then obviously, as I said, the demons started kicking in, the drugs and the drink. To the point, I think Jake talks about it as well, to the point where he didn't even, at times he didn't even hide it and stuff like that, which is really, really sad. So Vince ended up letting him go. And obviously that's a huge fall for most of these guys as wrestlers, because you're up there, you're at the pinnacle and the height of your career and all this kind of stuff. They talk about the storyline. Cornette talks about the storyline as he does. He always has great stories, Jimmy. He talks about the storyline with the Freebirds and stuff like that, and how they had blinded him in the eyes, and he was selling this from a kayfabe point of view, and how it was really, really important back then and stuff like that. So he was sitting ringside, pretending to be blind, basically. And the Freebirds, of course, were so hated. The Freebirds at the time were just so red hot. They were the ultimate heels. These guys had to be, nearly snuck out of buildings before they got killed and stuff like that. And especially Michael Hayes. He just had a connection with the audience to rile them up. And they were riling up JYD. And of course, the storyline with JYD was he was going to have a baby and he'd be able to hold the baby, but he wouldn't be able to see the baby because he'd been blinded by the Freebirds. And all of a sudden, this fan came out of the crowd over JYD's shoulder, who was sitting ringside, and pulled a gun on Michael P.S. Hayes. And then the decision had to be made there to break kayfabe, get the gun off the guy, or sit back and watch the Freebirds get shot for real. So that's wrestling back then, especially down the territory system and stuff like that. It was so real to people and so real to locals. It was the fabric and real part of their life. Oh, that's lovely. And just various different things. Obviously, his career at WWF didn't go as planned. And it was his time in WWF that this is where he developed this drug problem and stuff like that. Hacksaw mentions, Hacksaw mentions in it that nearly everyone back then at that time in the company was doing drugs or, abusing maybe alcohol or whatever it was at the time and stuff. So Hacksaw said it caused them all serious problems and stuff like that. But he said with JYD, it was just a matter of time because he had that addictive personality and stuff like that, you know. Of course, he was eventually fired. Um, Jake Roberts obviously talks about it. He says he had felt the same way at points in his life that drug addiction can consume you. Obviously, Jake, obviously talking from experience himself, you know what I mean? If you want to talk about addiction and falling apart and all that kind of stuff, who better to talk to than Jake Snake Roberts about it, of course. Had some eventful years then out on the small indies, and then he was hired by WCW, but Bill Watts was the vice president and booker at the time. Watts hoped that the two of them could create that Mid-South magic again, but it never really transpired. Then sadly in 1998, he was driving home from his daughter's high school graduation celebration when he died in a single car accident. The talk is that they feel that he maybe fell asleep at the wheel and that he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. We do have to say that he did blaze a trail through pro wrestling and stuff like that. And he did open a lot of doors for a lot of black wrestlers and stuff like that. But never really reached the heights that he should have reached. I remember this storyline on the screen there with Harley Race and stuff watching. I mean, if you look at the four people in that picture, they're unbelievable. Like, tragically, his demons caught up on him. And he sadly passed away from that car accident. And sadly, a number of years on, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. We'll talk about that. And his daughter took the induction for him, and she sadly passed away a few years later as well, from a heart problem or something like that, pulmonary problem or something like that. So very, very sad story. But much beloved, the JYD, the Junkyard Dog. He was an incredible athlete, as they say, and an unbelievable performer. Had such a great connection with the fans, but for some reason, when he went from Mid-South up to WWF, it all just went a little bit skew ways. His personality took over. As we said, the drink and the drugs kicked in, and that was that. One thing I said I did want to finish on that's not necessarily dark side of the ring. This was the class. This was the Hall of Fame 2004. An exceptional class when you look at it. But JYD takes his place in there with Slaughter, Jesse Superstar, Don Morocco, John Studd, Greg Valentine, Bobby Heenan, Hardy Race, and Tito Santana. That's an absolute stellar Hall of Fame. And certainly a Hall of Fame you'd be proud to be included in and stuff like that. So he does take his place in the WWE Hall of Fame, no doubt about it. Let's run down through some of his accolades and some of his championships and stuff like that. Mid-South Wrestling, he was the Mid-South Louisiana champion 3 times, Mid-South North American Heavyweight champion 4 times, Mid-South Tag Team champion 8 times. NWA Mid-America, he was the Tag Team champion 1 time with Gypsy Joe. I'm not too sure if that Gypsy Joe, I wonder is that Gypsy Joe the same Gypsy Joe that member got into the run-in with New Jack. I wonder is it the same Gypsy Joe. I must look into that actually. Interesting to see what that is there. Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Inspirational Wrestler of the Year 1980, as we said, down in Mid-South. He was just incredible. And he was ranked number 51 in the PWI Best 500 in 2003. He went into the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2012. Stampede Wrestling, he was Stampede North American Heavyweight Champion 2 times. He was USWA Unified World Heavyweight Champion 1 time. He was WCW World 6 Tag Team Champion with Ricky Morton and Tommy Rich, the Rock and Roll Express and the JYD. It must have been some entertainment. He was also the Wrestling Classic 1985. WWE Hall of Fame 2004, as we said, it's there on your screen. He won a Slammy Award, and he also Best Single Performer in 1986. For the Wrestling Observer newsletter, he won Feud of the Year in 1982 versus Ted DiBiase. They spoke about it on the show. He had the worst feud of the year in 1990 versus Ric Flair. This is kind of where you see the wheels coming off and stuff like that. And of course, worst tag team 1986 with George the Animal Steele. Imagine that, George the Animal Steele and JYD as a tag team. Good Lord, crazy, crazy stuff. But a whole plethora of championships there and awards and stuff like that. And we fondly remember JYD, of course. These dark side of the rings, they're never easy and stuff like that. They're always a tough gig. It's always, you know, a tale of tragedy or missed opportunity or, even darker stuff. That's why they call it Dark Side of the Ring. So I hope you're enjoying the reviews of them and stuff like that. He was much loved. Had a great connection with the audience. Was limited in his wrestling, but certainly monopolized what he could do, and certainly bookers did as well. Bill Watts, of course, was the main stable for him and stuff like that, and obviously Stampede as well in Canada with Stu Hart. But certainly remembered, certainly recognisable. When you see the figures, you know straight away it's JYD. The famous chains and the collar and all that stuff, and the way he come into the ring with the dog and the bite and the bark and all that kind of stuff. He was so cool. The kids absolutely adored him. But fondly remembered by wrestling fans worldwide, but obviously a very tragic situation. So R.I.P. JYD, we remember you and we mark your Dark Side of the Ring episode with this review. Until next time, folks, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification, and of course drop a like on the video, and we will be back again real soon. Cheers, folks.